There will be some spoilers for the first few hours of Infamous Second Son, as well as Infamous 2, so if you're afraid of spoilers for those two games, then you may not want to watch this video. I think it is safe to say that I am a moderately huge Infamous fan. Putting those two words together is an oxymoron, but I would say that I am a moderate fan of Infamous, as it took me over 4 years to play Infamous Second Son. On the other hand, I would say that I am a huge fan, as I earned the Platinum Trophy for Infamous 1 and 2, as well as 100% of the trophies for the Festival of Blood spin-off game, the shorter, weird vampire game. I always wanted to play the latest Infamous game, but I was a late PS4 adopter. By the time that I received my console, I was playing the latest and greatest hits rather than one of the launch titles. But I decided to bite the bullet and go back to Second Son to see how the game fared. I was expecting to have a great time as I had enjoyed messing around with the Last Light spin-off game. Unfortunately, however, I kept thinking back to Infamous 2 during the first few hours and was wishing that I was back in New Orleans rather than Seattle. There are not many sequels that I find inferior to the preceding title in a game series. For most games, sequels are minor or big steps up from their predecessor. I really find them to be a step backward rather than forward. Off the top of my head, I can think of Mass Effect 3 being inferior to 2, and I prefer Battlefront 2015 to Battlefront 2 2017. I am usually always on board for a new and improved sequel when it comes to gaming. This is why I was surprised to find myself bored with the first few hours of Infamous Second Son. The first moments of the game felt promising as it introduced the main problems with the world and our protagonist. Delsin seemed interesting enough, but his cool beanie would not be enough of a character trait to carry the game forward. I found the dialogue to be fine, but the game's humor slowly began to creep in and taint the experience. And now that I am a few hours into the game, the humor does not stop. For me personally, I do not find the humor to be funny at all. Most of it is cringeworthy and just makes me roll my eyes. Too bad that the game employs the comedy angle way too often. But looking past the dialogue, the game shows that Delsin does not have any powers and he is just another human being. It would have been nice to establish his character and the world around him a bit more. However, the game chooses to jump straight into the major conflict by granting Delsin his powers after only a few minutes. Within the first hour of the game, Delsin goes from being powerless to gaining his powers and then to mastering his powers. I know that playing for hours with no abilities could be boring, but I did feel that the intro of the game felt rushed. Even Delsin's emotions changed from being an outcast to being scared of his new powers to feeling powerful and to even feeling cocky. The tone of Delsin jumped around as much as he would jump around from building to building. With this story, we are given the main problem and goal within the first hour as well. Stop the evil lady and help those in need. That is pretty much the story of the game. Very simple, very boring. I wouldn't mind a simple backdrop if the characters and situations were more interesting. But everyone feels very bland and very much like an archetype rather than a human being. And keep in mind that I'm not saying that Infamous 2 mastered all of these areas. From what I can recall of Infamous 2, which is not a lot of story details, I do not remember any amazing and grandiose stories or character moments. I do recall a lot of great moments, but nothing that is necessarily mind-blowing or ahead of the pack in comparison to other games. I did find it enjoyable though. With Second Son, I do not care about what is happening and who it is happening to. Even though it is important, let's look past the story and move on to gameplay. Unfortunately, that also feels lackluster. In Infamous 2, Cole wielded a plethora of different electrical powers and an awesome melee weapon. He could also use other elements depending on which missions you completed. In Second Son, Delsin also uses different powers, but they all manage to feel like bland and weaker versions of Cole's powers. The first power you gain is smoke, and his melee weapon is a chain. The grenade ability is literally to make enemies cough so that you can take them down easier. Since Delsin cannot use electricity, his movement is restricted to morphing into a cloud and moving through the air in air vents. The free-flowing movement of Infamous 2 feels like it is gone in Second Son, as you cannot travel across power lines or rails but can only travel through limited vents. Morphing back and forth from your human form to the cloud form makes the movement feel disjointed and not fluid. The movement in combat feels like a drastic step back. The button layout of the controls even feels inferior, as the hover mechanic is X rather than R1, and the missiles and grenades are on R1 and L1 rather than triangle and square. Changing the layout from the previous title may not seem like a big problem, but I feel that the changes make for less fluidity when attacking and moving around the world. Speaking of the controls themselves, the shooting mechanics, movement, and even the drain mechanic feel worse in Second Son. I am still struggling with aiming in Second Son as it feels clunky and weighed down in comparison to Infamous 2. The movement also feels less refined as I get stuck on the environment and struggle to move around. And the drain mechanic cannot be stopped on a whim like in Infamous 2. Stopping the drain mechanic allowed you to quickly top off and move on rather than completely filling a large chunk of your energy. It was not always necessary to top off when in the middle of a firefight, as it could cause you to take damage. I find myself getting attacked in the middle of the drain process consistently in Second Son. When these three things come together, it makes the game feel like a clunky package where the game is fighting your every move. After the first few hours, the game does start to pick up and introduce new abilities, which help the game to feel a bit better. However, I think that I will not be finishing the game for the time being. There feels to be too many problems which are not worth tolerating. It is unfortunate, as I wanted to love this game, but there is a sort of magic missing which makes the game feel like an Infamous knockoff rather than a deserved sequel. I even jumped back into Infamous 2 for a few minutes to see if I was remembering the previous game correctly or not. I found myself lost in how great the movement and abilities felt. I was able to easily and fluidly fly around the environment and use my abilities to help me navigate the terrain and attack enemies. It felt more refined and polished than Second Son. If we ever get another Infamous game, I hope that it will look back at what made Infamous 2 so great, rather than what Infamous Second Son tried to tack on. And that's about it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, make sure to leave a like and consider subscribing and all those beautiful things, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye guys.